Have you ever made a joke that changed your life forever? That's exactly what happened to Alex Morgan on his 30th birthday. What started as a harmless comment to his boss turned into a journey that would test everything he thought he knew about love, power, and what he truly wanted in life. If you're enjoying the story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional journeys that will leave you thinking long after the video ends. The office was buzzing with the usual Monday morning energy when Alex walked in, coffee in hand, trying to shake off the lingering effects of his birthday celebration the night before. At 30, he felt neither young nor old, just stuck. Stuck in a job that paid the bills but didn't fulfill him, stuck in a city he'd never planned to call home for this long, and stuck in a pattern of relationships that fizzled before they ever really began. "Happy belated birthday, Alex," called Mia from accounting as she passed his desk. "How does it feel to be ancient?" Alex laughed, setting down his coffee. "Like I should have more figured out by now." He hadn't expected anyone at work to remember his birthday, especially not after the weekend. But as he settled into his chair, he noticed a small gift box on his desk with a simple card that read, "To New Beginnings. C." C for Catherine. Catherine Wells, his boss for the past 3 years. Brilliant, intimidating, and impossibly elegant, she ran the marketing department with precision and vision that had earned her both respect and fear throughout the company. At 42, she was everything Alex wasn't: confident, accomplished, and seemingly untouchable. Alex opened the box to find a vintage fountain pen, the kind he'd once mentioned admiring in a passing conversation months ago. He hadn't thought she was listening. He certainly hadn't thought she'd remember. When Catherine called him into her office later that morning, Alex brought the pen with him, turning it over in his hands as he sat across from her desk. "Do you like it?" she asked, her eyes fixed on a report in front of her. "It's perfect," Alex said. "But you didn't have to." "I wanted to," she interrupted, finally looking up. 30 is significant. It deserves to be marked properly. There was something in her gaze that made Alex shift in his seat. They'd always had a good professional relationship, respectful, occasionally warm, but never crossing any lines. Yet in that moment, with her eyes on him, he felt seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and thrilling. "Well, if I'd known turning 30 would get me gifts like this," he joked, "I would have done it sooner." Catherine smiled, a rare full smile that transformed her usually serious face. "What else did you get?" "Not much," Alex admitted. "Dinner with friends, too many drinks, and the realization that I'm no closer to any of the things I thought I'd have by now." "Such as?" "Oh, you know. Purpose. Direction. Someone to come home to who isn't a houseplant." Catherine leaned back in her chair, studying him. "The plants aren't working out? They keep dying on me," Alex said with a self-deprecating laugh. "Apparently, I can't even commit to proper watering schedules." "Perhaps you haven't found the right plant." There it was again, that look, that slight shift in her voice that made the conversation feel like it was about something else entirely. "Maybe what I need is someone to marry me and force me to grow up," Alex said, the joke tumbling out before he could think better of it. "Any takers?" He expected her to laugh it off, to remind him of workplace propriety, or to simply change the subject. What he didn't expect was for Catherine to stand up, walk around her desk, and lean down close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle that made his heart race. "My place," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. "Tonight." Before Alex could process what was happening, she straightened up and returned to her chair, professional mask firmly back in place. "That will be all for now, Alex. Close the door on your way out." He stumbled back to his desk in a daze, the pen clutched tightly in his hand. Had that really happened? Had his boss just what? Propositioned him? Accepted his joke proposal? He couldn't make sense of it, couldn't reconcile the Catherine Wells he'd known for 3 years with the woman who had just whispered those words to him. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Alex tried to focus on his work, on the campaign proposal due at the end of the week, but his mind kept returning to that moment in Catherine's office. By 5 o'clock, he'd convinced himself he'd misunderstood, that she'd meant something entirely different, that he'd be making a fool of himself if he showed up at her door. But as he was packing up to leave, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 8 p.m. 1420, Riverside Drive, apartment 12B. Don't be late. Alex stared at the message, his pulse quickening. He'd never given Catherine his personal number. She must have gotten it from HR, which meant this was real. This was happening. He went home first, showering and changing 3 times before settling on a simple button-down and jeans. Too casual? Too formal? He had no idea what the protocol was for visiting your boss's apartment after she'd whispered an invitation that might or might not be romantic in nature. At 7:58 p.m., he stood outside apartment 12B, hand raised to knock, frozen with indecision. This could cost him his job. This could be a misunderstanding that would haunt him forever. This could be... The door opened before he could knock, and there stood Catherine, but not the Catherine he knew from work. This Catherine wore her dark hair down around her shoulders instead of in its usual tight bun. This Catherine was barefoot, dressed in slim black pants and a soft gray sweater that made her look younger, softer, more approachable. "You came," she said, and there was a note of surprise in her voice that made Alex realize she'd been as uncertain about this as he was. "I did," he replied, finding his voice. "Though I'm not entirely sure what this is." Catherine stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. "That makes 2 of us." Her apartment was exactly what he would have expected. Elegant, minimalist, with carefully chosen art on the walls and not a thing out of place. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city lights, and for a moment, Alex just stood there, taking it all in. "Wine?" Catherine asked, moving to the kitchen. "Please." She poured 2 glasses of red and handed one to him, their fingers brushing in a way that sent a jolt through Alex's entire body. "I should explain," Catherine said, leading him to the living room where they sat on opposite ends of a sleek gray sofa. "What I did today was impulsive and inappropriate. I'm your boss. There are power dynamics at play that make this," she gestured between them, "complicated." Alex nodded, relief and disappointment warring within him. So this was a letdown conversation. She'd had second thoughts. Of course she had. "I understand," he said. "We can pretend it never happened." "Is that what you want?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. "I don't know what I want," Alex admitted. "I've spent the last 3 years seeing you as my untouchable boss. I never allowed myself to think of you as anything else. And now I'm sitting in your apartment, drinking your very good wine, trying to figure out if this is a dream or a very elaborate HR violation." Catherine laughed, a genuine sound that Alex realized he'd rarely heard before. "I've been thinking about you," she said, her voice softer now. "Not just as an employee. Not for a while." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I'm 12 years older than you. Because I'm your direct supervisor. Because until today, I had no reason to think you saw me as anything but the demanding boss who critiques your campaign strategies and makes you rewrite press releases at midnight." Alex took a long sip of his wine, buying time to organize his thoughts. "When I made that joke today about someone marrying me, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just talking. But when you responded the way you did, it was like something clicked into place. Something I hadn't let myself see before." Catherine moved closer on the sofa, close enough that their knees almost touched. "And what was that?" "That maybe the reason none of my relationships work out is because I'm comparing everyone to an impossible standard. To you." The confession hung in the air between them, too honest, too raw to take back. For a moment, Alex thought he'd gone too far, said too much. But then Catherine set down her wine glass and reached for his hand. "I didn't invite you here to marry you," she said, her fingers warm against his. "But I did invite you here to see if there's something real between us. Something worth exploring, despite the complications." "And if there is?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then we figure it out. Together." What followed was a night of conversation that stretched until dawn. They talked about everything: their childhoods, their dreams, their fears, the paths that had led them to this moment. Catherine told him about her marriage that had ended 6 years ago, about the choice she'd made to prioritize her career over starting a family, about the loneliness that sometimes kept her awake at night. Alex shared his insecurities, his feeling of drifting through life without purpose, his fear that he'd never find what he was looking for because he didn't even know what that was. As the first light of morning filtered through the windows, they sat closer than before, the initial awkwardness long gone, replaced by a connection that felt both new and somehow familiar. "I should go," Alex said reluctantly, aware that they both had to be at work in a few hours, aware that walking into the office together would raise questions neither of them was ready to answer. "Yes," Catherine agreed, though she made no move to let go of his hand. "This isn't going to be simple, you know." "I know. If we decide to pursue this, there will be consequences. I'll have to disclose our relationship to HR. You might be transferred to another department. People will talk." Alex nodded, the reality of their situation settling in. "Is it worth it?" "We haven't even." He gestured vaguely, feeling suddenly shy. Catherine smiled, reaching up to touch his face gently. "That's why you're going home now. Because if that happens, I want us both to be certain." He leaned into her touch, closing his eyes briefly. "And how do we get to certainty?" "We take it slow. We see each other outside of work. We get to know each other as people, not as boss and employee. And at work, nothing changes. I'm still your boss. You're still my employee. We maintain professional boundaries." It sounded impossible, but Alex found himself nodding. "Okay, slow." As he left her apartment that morning, walking into the crisp dawn air, Alex felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not just for a relationship, but for a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility rather than obligation. The next few weeks were a delicate dance. At work, Catherine was as demanding as ever, critiquing his ideas with the same sharp precision, never showing him any special treatment. If anything, she was harder on him than before, as if to prove to herself and others that their personal connection wasn't affecting her professional judgment. But after hours, they met in quiet restaurants in different parts of the city, went for long walks along the river, spent evenings in her apartment or his, talking and laughing and slowly, carefully, falling in love. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when the complications seemed too great, when the whispers of coworkers who noticed them leaving at the same time too often became too loud to ignore. 6 weeks after that first night, Catherine called Alex into her office and closed the door. "I've spoken to HR," she said without preamble. "I've disclosed our relationship." Alex felt his heart race. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't decided it was time. "What did they say?" "They're transferring you to the digital team, effective next week. You'll report to Marcus instead of me." "You didn't think to discuss this with me first?" Alex asked, hurt creeping into his voice. Catherine's professional mask slipped, just for a moment, revealing uncertainty beneath. "I thought it was the right thing to do. For both of us. That wasn't your decision to make alone, wasn't it? I'm the one in the position of power here, Alex. I'm the one who could be accused of favoritism or, worse, coercion. So you made a unilateral decision about my career without consulting me," Alex said, standing up. "That sounds a lot like an abuse of power to me." He left her office without waiting for a response, anger and disappointment churning inside him. This was exactly what he'd feared, that their professional relationship would poison their personal one, that the power dynamic would always be there, unbalancing everything. For 3 days, they didn't speak outside of necessary work interactions. Alex threw himself into preparing for his transfer, trying to ignore the ache in his chest, the feeling that something precious was slipping away before it had really begun. On the 4th day, he found a note on his desk when he arrived at work. "I'm sorry. You were right. Can we talk?" See. That evening, they met at a small park halfway between their apartments. Catherine was already there when he arrived, sitting on a bench, looking more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. "I made a mistake," she said as soon as he sat down beside her. "I've spent so long making decisions on my own that I forgot what it means to be part of a partnership." "Is that what we are?" Alex asked. "Partners?" Catherine looked at him, her eyes serious. I want us to be. But it won't work if I keep treating you like an employee in any context. And it won't work if the age difference or my position makes you feel like you have less say in what happens between us. I don't care about the age difference, Alex said. I never did. And I don't care about your position, except when it affects us like this. The transfer is still happening, Catherine said. HR was clear that we can't continue to work in a direct reporting relationship. But I should have talked to you about it first, should have made it our decision, not mine. Alex nodded, some of his anger fading. Yes, you should have. I'm not perfect at this, Alex. I've been alone for a long time. I've built walls to protect myself, to succeed in a world that often doesn't take women in power seriously. Breaking those habits isn't easy. I don't need you to be perfect, Alex said, reaching for her hand. I just need you to see me as your equal, regardless of our professional positions or our ages or anything else. I do see you that way, Catherine said, squeezing his hand. That's what scares me. You make me vulnerable in a way I haven't allowed myself to be in years. They sat in silence for a moment, the evening settling around them, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. So what now? Alex finally asked. Now we try again, Catherine said. We figure out how to be together, without letting our work lives dictate our relationship. We learn how to communicate better, how to make decisions together. And the transfer? You'll still move to the digital team. But we'll talk about what that means for your career, how to make sure it's a step forward, not sideways. Alex nodded, feeling some of the tension leave his body. Okay, I can work with that. The months that followed weren't without challenges. Alex's new position under Marcus came with a learning curve that sometimes left him frustrated and questioning his abilities. Catherine faced scrutiny from upper management about her disclosure, with some suggesting she'd shown poor judgment in pursuing a relationship with a subordinate, even if she'd eventually done the right thing by reporting it. But through it all, they grew stronger together. They learned each other's rhythms, discovered the joy of building a life that intertwined with another's. They fought sometimes, about work, about the future, about the small irritations that any couple faces, but they always found their way back to each other, always remembered what they were fighting for. On Alex's 31st birthday, exactly 1 year after the joke that had changed everything, Catherine took him to dinner at the restaurant where they'd had their first real date. Happy birthday, she said, raising her glass to his. How does it feel to be even more ancient? Alex laughed, the echo of Mia's question from a year ago not lost on him. Like I have more figured out than I did before. Such as? Purpose. Direction. Someone to come home to who isn't a houseplant. Catherine smiled, reaching across the table to take his hand. The plants are still dying, though. Some things never change. After dinner, they walked along the river, the city lights reflecting on the water, the night air cool against their skin. When Catherine stopped walking and turned to face him, Alex felt a shift in the atmosphere, a sense that something important was about to happen. Alex, Catherine said, her voice steady despite the emotion he could see in her eyes. A year ago, you made a joke about needing someone to marry you. I responded in a way that changed both our lives. Alex felt his heart begin to race. I remember. That night, I told you I hadn't invited you over to marry you, she continued, taking both his hands in hers. But I've been thinking about that conversation a lot lately. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box, and Alex felt the world around them fade away, narrowing to just this moment, just the two of them standing by the river under the stars. I'm not joking when I say this, Catherine said, opening the box to reveal a simple platinum band. Marry me, Alex. Not because you need someone to force you to grow up, you've done that all on your own. Marry me because this year has shown me what it means to truly be a partner, to share my life with someone who sees me completely and loves me anyway. Alex stared at the ring, at the woman holding it, feeling a surge of emotions so powerful it momentarily robbed him of speech. This wasn't how he'd imagined this moment. He'd been saving for a ring himself, planning a proposal for their upcoming vacation, but somehow, this felt right. Catherine had always been the one to push them forward, to take